He boarded the plane like any other passenger, calm, confident, and ready to return home after sealing a major deal. But before takeoff, everything changed. A flight attendant approached, and what happened next would leave an entire cabin in stunned silence. A man who had built an empire from nothing, suddenly treated like he didn't belong. No crime, no conflict, just the color of his skin. They thought they could humiliate him quietly, move on, and no one would ever know. But the next day, the world found out, and the airline paid a price they'd never forget. Marcus Reed wasn't just another businessman. He was the name behind one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the country. From late nights in a cramped apartment to signing multi-million-dollar contracts, he'd earned everything through grit and brilliance. To most, he was living proof that success could silence prejudice. But deep down, Marcus knew no title, no fortune, could completely shield him from how the world still saw him. That morning, he was headed to New York for a crucial partnership meeting, a deal worth more than $100 million. He arrived early, smiling politely at staff, nodding to passengers as he took his seat in first class. It was routine. He'd flown dozens of times before, always professional, always composed. But as the engines prepared to start, something felt off. A brief whisper among the attendants, a glance from a passenger a few rows back, then footsteps, firm, deliberate, moving closer. Marcus didn't know it yet, but that simple flight would soon become a public lesson in dignity, power, and the price of discrimination. At first, Marcus didn't think much of it. Maybe a mix-up with the seating chart, maybe nothing at all. He smiled politely when the flight attendant stopped beside him, clutching a tablet. But then came the words, quiet, rehearsed, too formal to be innocent. "Sir, there's been a change in seating. We'll need you to move to another section." Another section. Marcus frowned, glancing at the empty seat beside him, then at the older white man standing a few rows away, arms crossed, staring. The pieces clicked. The unease in his stomach hardened into something heavier. "I believe I'm in the right seat," he said calmly. "Here's my boarding pass." The attendant hesitated, her voice soft but trembling. "I understand, sir, but this passenger has a special request. We'd appreciate your cooperation. A request, not a policy, not a mistake. A request, and somehow it was him who had to move." A few passengers shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to listen. One woman lowered her gaze. Another man pulled out his phone as if distraction could erase the injustice unfolding before him. Marcus took a breath. He could feel the familiar burn, that quiet rage of being made small in spaces he had already earned his right to occupy. He'd spent years building a name respected by executives who once ignored him, and now, on a random Tuesday flight, a stranger's special request was enough to strip that dignity away. "Sir, please," the attendant repeated, eyes darting toward the captain's door. "We don't want to delay the flight." Marcus glanced out the window, heart pounding. He knew what would happen if he refused. The headlines, the looks, the accusations. A scene, a headline. "Unruly passenger removed." The irony wasn't lost on him, so he stood up, slowly, deliberately. The silence in the cabin was suffocating. He gathered his briefcase, his coat, his pride, and walked past the man, now smiling faintly, taking the seat Marcus had paid for. In coach, the air felt colder, the hum of the engine louder. He sat motionless, staring straight ahead as the plane lifted off. But the humiliation didn't stay in that seat. It spread. Through his thoughts, his pulse, his memory. He had been taught all his life to be twice as good, twice as calm, twice as forgiving. And yet, somehow, that still wasn't enough. When the plane landed, Marcus didn't speak a word. But by the time his car reached the hotel, his phone was already buzzing. His assistant, his PR team, his legal counsel. Word was spreading. Someone had filmed the incident. It was already online. And before the airline could issue a statement, before anyone could spin a story, Marcus Reed was already preparing his own, because this time, he wouldn't stay silent. This time, the lesson wouldn't be his to learn. It would be theirs. By morning, the video had already gone viral. Millions watched as Marcus Reed, a man known for his calm leadership and quiet dignity, was shown being asked to move seats because a white passenger felt uncomfortable. The clip was only a minute long, but the silence in it said everything. The airline spokesperson called it a misunderstanding. Social media called it what it was, racism in a suit and tie. Reporters swarmed the company's headquarters. Their stock price dipped. Customers canceled flights, but Marcus stayed quiet. Not a single post, not a single interview. Instead, he sat in a glass conference room overlooking the skyline, his team waiting for a decision. On the table before him lay the final contract, a $120 million partnership that would have made the airline one of his firm's biggest clients. One signature away, he picked up the pen, then paused. Every moment from that flight replayed in his mind. The whispers, the stares, the humiliation that tried to shrink him back into silence. He thought about the boy he once was, told to stay polite, stay composed, stay grateful for every seat he was allowed to occupy. Then, he put the pen down. When the call came in from the airline's executive board, his voice was calm but sharp as steel. "We're withdrawing our offer," he said. "Effective immediately." There was a long pause. Then panic. Then denial. But Marcus didn't waver. The same quiet composure they once mistook for submission now carried the weight of consequence. That single decision cost the airline millions in partnerships and public trust. But to Marcus, it was worth far more than money. It was dignity. It was justice. He had been humiliated in front of hundreds. Now the world was watching them kneel, and this time, no one could look away. In the days that followed, Marcus Reed didn't post a victory speech. He didn't need to. The headlines did it for him. The story of the man kicked out of first class, and the silence that cost an airline, $120 million became a symbol of something far greater than business. People began to see what Marcus had always known. Racism doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through policies, smiles, and special requests. Sometimes it hides behind professionalism and power, hoping no one will call it by its name. For Marcus, the loss wasn't about money. It was about every moment in his life when he'd been told to stay calm, to let it go, to not make a scene. This time he did make one, and the world finally paid attention. The airline issued an apology, of course. They promised training, policy reform, and diversity initiatives. But Marcus knew this wasn't about one flight or one company. It was about the system that allowed it to happen in the first place, the quiet belief that some people belong more than others. In the end, Marcus didn't fight to humiliate anyone. He fought to remind them, and all of us, that dignity isn't a privilege you can earn. It's a right you should never have to defend. And as his story spread across screens and headlines, it asked a question no one could ignore. How many more times will success, respect, or wealth be tested against the color of a man's skin before change stops being a promise and finally becomes a reality?